All right, kids, pause that weird anime you're watching, 'cause it's time for a real history lesson. When you think of ancient Rome, you probably imagine a bunch of jacked dudes in skirts, steamrolling everything like they're playing Civilization on easy mode. But let me tell you something, sunshine. Rome wasn't some untouchable giga-chad. Not even close. And because I love you, I went digging through history to find the most humiliating, soul-crushing defeats Rome ever took. No, we're not talking about Asterix and Obelix clowning the Romans again, and we're skipping Teutoburg. Everyone and their grandma already knows that one. So buckle up, 'cause this ain't the Hollywood version of Rome. So, here's the deal. Rome had this guy, Crassus, rich as hell, like owns half of Rome rich. The kind of rich where, if he were around today, he'd be buying up failing social media companies just to ruin them for fun. But Crassus didn't just want money, he wanted glory. So this financial wizard wakes up one day and goes, you know what would be cool? Invading Parthia. And instead of using strategy, intelligence, or, I don't know, Google Maps, he just points at the desert and says, that way. Real solid navigation skills. About on par with your average American Zoomer who thinks Africa is a country and can't find Canada on a map unless there's a big old label on it. Spoiler alert, that was the wrong way. By the time the Romans finally dragged their 40,000-strong army across the Parthian desert, they were sunburned, dehydrated, and questioning every life decision that led them there, kind of like spring breakers in Vegas, but with more armor and way less tequila. And then, bam, here come the Parthians. So Crassus, tactical genius that he was, orders the classic Roman formation, a big, heavily armored square. See, the Parthian general, Serena, took one look at this and thought, oh, how cute. They think this is a medieval jousting tournament. Instead of taking the bait, he unleashed something far worse for the Romans. He unleashed 9,000 horse archers. Now, these weren't your run-of-the-mill archers. These guys were raised in the saddle. They could probably shoot a fly off a camel's back. And their arrows? Yeah, those bad boys didn't just hit Roman shields, they went through Roman shields. And the guy holding them. So now you've got thousands of Romans packed together like a Times Square subway car. Every time they tried to charge out and fight back, the Parthians would pretend to run away, only to turn around and shoot them in the face. And that famous Roman turtle formation you've seen in movies? Yeah, useless. Shields don't mean squat when the arrows go through them, like a Taco Bell meal goes through your digestive system. Then, as if things weren't bad enough, Crassus sees a whole caravan of camels coming toward them. But these weren't your cute, influencer-friendly camels. These were ammo delivery camels, hauling thousands of extra arrows for the Parthian archers. The Romans weren't in a battle, they were in a shooting gallery, and they were the targets. So Crassus panics, orders a retreat, and leaves behind anyone too slow to escape. But joke's on him. Half his army had already noped out the night before. Out of 40,000 Romans who marched in, only about 10,000 made it home. See, the Romans, they were all about up-close, in-your-face sword fights, real personal, real messy. But the Parthians? Oh, those sneaky bastards turned the whole fight into a long-distance relationship. And let me tell you, it was a genius move. See this guy in the picture? Now, before you ask, no, not the guy with the fava beans. This Hannibal was a Carthaginian general who made the Romans wish they'd just stayed home that day. So, here's the deal. Rome had just conquered all of Italy and was feeling pretty high and mighty, thinking they were the new bosses of the Mediterranean. But there was one little problem: Carthage. And Carthage wasn't about to just step aside and let Rome take everything. So, boom, the Punic Wars. By the time we get to the Second Punic War, Rome's got its hands full, half their armies off conquering Spain, and the other half is getting ready to attack Carthage. That's when Hannibal says, "Nah, how about I bring the fight to you?" And this guy doesn't just show up, he crosses the Alps with elephants. First, he smashes the Roman forces coming from Sicily. Then, he wipes out the reinforcements from Spain. Rome's losing battles left and right, and the people back home, they're losing their minds. See, back then, Rome was still a republic, which meant public opinion mattered. And when the public thought you were screwing up, they didn't just post angry tweets, they rioted. Second Punic War? More like Second Panic War. And what do the brilliant minds in charge decide? Instead of putting one experienced general in charge, the Senate goes, "You know what'll fix this? 2 guys fighting over the steering wheel." Brilliant.
Arrested Development.
To calm the people down, they pick one commander from the aristocracy. Careful, cautious, slow, and steady. And the other? Gaius Terentius Varro, a man of the people, which sounds great until you realize the man had the patience of a toddler on a sugar rush. His battle plan? Run straight at Hannibal until he goes away. But wait, it gets dumber. Instead of letting one guy lead, Rome decides they'll switch commanders every single day. One day, it's Mr. Play It Safe. The next, Mr. Full Speed into Disaster. Imagine swapping drivers in a race car at 200 miles per hour. That's the level of stupidity we're talking about. And guess what? That was exactly what Hannibal wanted. When it was Varro's turn to lead, Hannibal baited him into a fight on an open plain. Perfect for Carthage's cavalry. 90,000 Romans marched out, thinking they were about to crush Hannibal's measly 50,000 troops. But Hannibal, he had the strategy of a chess grandmaster playing against a dude who just learned how the horse piece moves. Both sides lined up the usual way, infantry in the middle, cavalry on the flanks. But here's the problem. Carthage's cavalry was way better. They obliterated the Roman horsemen, then swung around and attacked the Romans from behind. Meanwhile, Hannibal's center, his weakest troops, started falling back, luring the Romans in. And then, bam! The Carthaginian flanks closed in, completely surrounding the Roman army. What happened next wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. The Romans were packed in so tight they could barely swing their swords. Survivors later told horror stories. Some said men were buried alive in the crush of bodies. It was like the Battle of the Bastards, but worse. Carthage sent peace envoys like, "Hey, you done?" And Rome? Peace? Never heard of it? They banned mourning, told women no crying, and just powered through like a citywide midlife crisis. Right at that moment, in walks Publius Scipio, fresh off the battlefield in Spain. And what does he hear? A bunch of whiny senators talking about peace? Peace! This man didn't just crawl through blood, sweat, and Spanish dust to come home and hear that nonsense. And what does Scipio do? Pulls his sword. tells them to shut up and fight. That's main character energy. Rome was out of soldiers, so they got desperate. They drafted criminals, debtors, and even slaves, bringing the total number of new recruits to 8,000.
Нас 25 тысяч, и мы идем разбираться, почему в стране...
And who's leading the charge? Scipio. With Spain secured, he takes the fight to Carthage, forces Hannibal home, and then, bam, pulls a reverse Uno card, uses Hannibal's own strategy against him, wrecks his army, and just like that, game over. Scipio earns the title Scipio Africanus, and Hannibal? Well, let's just say his retirement plan involved a lot of running. For Carthage, the Punic Wars truly lived up to their name, the Punish Wars. Lesson of the day: if you get knocked down, you get back up. Now, somebody bring me a beer.
I'm Scottish!
The Romans had this brilliant idea: hey, let's conquer Scotland. And let me tell you, that was about as smart as installing TikTok on your grandma's phone. Scotland, back then called Caledonia, was a God-forsaken land of hills, rain, and guys who considered fighting a national pastime. And in some ways, not much has changed since then. Speaking of Scotland, kids, I once went fishing there. Here's a photo. Take a look. Anyway, back to the story. Step 1. Burn money like there's no tomorrow. So Rome marches in, all cocky, and says, "This land is ours now." The locals, they weren't impressed. They just melted into the hills, waited for the Romans to get comfy, and then came back swinging. Rome's solution? Oh, just build a bunch of fortified camps to control Scotland. Yeah, sure, good luck with that. Keeping 25,000 troops up there required 20 tons of grain every year. And to build those forts, 1,000,000 cubic feet of timber, 10 tons of nails. Just for walls, they needed 30 kilometers of wood. You know how much forest that is? 247 acres. That's like 187 NFL fields or 112 Fenway Parks. Yeah, that many trees. Greta Thunberg would have been furious. Rome was cutting down entire forests just to get bullied by a bunch of dudes with blue face paint. Eventually, Emperor Hadrian showed up, took one look around, and went, "Nope, we're done here." Instead of wasting more resources, he built a massive wall across northern Britain and called it a day. It was supposed to keep the barbarians out. Keyword, supposed to. Step 2, realize you built a useless wall. Here's the thing about walls. They only work if your enemy is dumber than the wall. The Scots, they just hopped in boats and sailed around it. Absolute legends. And the guys guarding Hadrian's wall? Oh, you'll love this. They were often the same barbarians they were supposed to be protecting the empire from. That's like hiring a raccoon to guard your trash can. Which brings us to 367 AD, the Great Conspiracy. Sounds dramatic, right? It was. The Picts, one of the biggest Scottish tribes, took a look at Rome's problems and thought, now's our chance. So they had a little chat with the Roman border guards and basically said, hey, what if we didn't fight each other and just looted the empire instead? And the guards were like, you son of a gun, I'm in. So the Picts just waltzed through Hadrian's wall, teamed up with some raiders, and went on a shopping spree. Only instead of Target, they looted Roman towns. Rome eventually sent a legion to clean up the mess, but the damage was done. Hadrian's wall wasn't a defense, it was a liability. Step 3, cut your losses and bail. By this point, Rome was falling apart like a cheap Amazon order. The Germans were rampaging through Gaul, the Persians were knocking on the Eastern Front, and Africa, Rome's breadbasket, was turning into a lawless wasteland. After 50 more years of trying and failing to hold on to Britain, Rome finally threw in the towel. They packed their bags, left the Brits to fend for themselves, and focused on more immediate problems like, not collapsing entirely. Now, let's get serious. See, Rome had a problem: barbarians. And to Rome, a barbarian was anyone who wasn't Roman. Didn't matter if you had a kingdom or knew how to use a knife and fork. If you weren't them, you were a savage. But here's the kicker. Rome needed barbarians to protect Rome from barbarians. They hired them to guard borders, fight wars and farmland, and guess what? The barbarians got real good at being Roman. But Grandpa, weren't they the bad guys? Ah, my sweet summer child. Most barbarians weren't invading for fun. They were running from someone worse. The Huns, Goths, Vandals. They weren't conquerors, they were refugees. They showed up at Rome's doorstep like, hey, we'll fight, farm, pay taxes, just let us in. And Rome for a while said, fine, just don't break anything. Over time, they stopped being outsiders. They became citizens, soldiers, even emperors. When their kingdoms popped up on the empire's ruins, their kings didn't think they were wrecking Rome. They thought they were Rome. And if that ain't history's biggest paradox, I don't know what is. All right, kids, Grandpa's done schooling you on Roman failures. I'm off fishing. Here's some cash. Don't blow it all on avocado toast. Go touch some grass.